He's about 455 yards away. He's going to hit about a 2-iron, I think.
This is the School of Motion podcast. Come for the MoGraph, stay for the puns. If you're putting this much thought into your own website and the way you present yourself, then like a client's going to recognize like, wow, they're going to put a lot of thought and reasoning behind the type of work that they're going to do for us. And it's going to be worth the amount that they are asking for. It just puts that a little bit more professionalism in it too. As long as you're consistent, then I think you're golden.
If you have ever opened up After Effects version CC 2018, then you have seen Mitch Meyers' work. He partnered up with our brilliant friend Jorge Estrada, aka J Arcanist, to create the splash screen for that version of After Effects. Oh, and it was his first freelance job. Now, how in the heck did an opportunity like that fall in his lap? Well, it turns out Mitch has done a lot of things right when it comes to building a personal brand, doing outreach, and having a strong online presence. He's also really talented, which helps. In this episode, I talked to Mitch about how he developed the look that his work has, which is really cool and filmic, and also about his approach to his career. There are tons of actionable tips in this episode, and I think this is one where you may want to take some notes. Now, before we meet Mitch, let's hear from one of our incredible alumni.
My name is Rob Hunyadi from Columbus, Ohio, and I've taken the Character Animation Bootcamp and Bringing Academy. And what I've gotten out of these classes is a really great foundation for character animation. I used to dread projects that had aspects of character animation in them, and now it's become my favorite part of a project. Anyone who wants to learn the fundamentals of character animation and how to do it in a way that makes sense, you need to take Character Animation Bootcamp. And if you want to learn how to create the rigs that they use inside of After Effects, then you definitely need to check out Rigging Academy. Take both of them. Trust me, it's worth it. My name is Rob Hunyadi, and I'm a School of Motion graduate.
Mitch, dude, it is awesome to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time, dude.
No problem. It's good to be here.
So the first thing I want to ask you about is actually, I kind of ask everybody this whose work I think is like beautiful and well designed. Like, where did you develop your eye for this stuff? Because your work, especially, it's got I tend to describe stuff like this as filmic. You know, like it's got like a lot of glows and texture, and it's obviously 3D. And you kind of have an eye, almost like a cinematographer. And I'm curious, like, when did you develop that and how?
Yeah, so I think it was kind of like a part of a larger process, because I started out as just kind of like a normal motion designer. I did a lot of like 2D stuff, some 3D things. And in the beginning of my career, it's more of trying to develop my career as an artist, less and more so than trying to develop your look and style and stuff like that. And so it wasn't until I kind of found my place in 3D, and I started to kind of find out that how like fun it was for me, and it was very natural, and it felt like my place to be. And so I started working really heavily in 3D and knew that I wanted my work to kind of represent what I wanted to do, what kind of work I wanted to get from an agency that would hire me, because I wasn't really picturing going freelance at the time anyway. So going into this 3D world, and kind of whenever I had downtime, it was always sitting in cinema, especially when I was at my last agency. It was like every lunch break, I'd try to like create something cool, just to kind of get more in tune with my programs in 3D, which is Cinema 4D primarily, and kind of test the waters and see if maybe this is more of the right path. Maybe I can be more of a specialist. And when you become a specialist, you almost need that look and something that kind of sets you apart. Right. Since you're going after a specific thing, you're not going to be hired for a bunch of, different types of looks and elements and things like that. So you need to really set yourself apart. And that's when I really, I think I started developing an eye for just cinematography while just studying film theory, which is something I like to do for fun. I'm kind of the dude who will watch a movie and just totally zone out on just like reasoning on why they chose specific lights and like camera moves and the way they edited the film and stuff like that. It just always intrigues me. So I think just doing that on my downtime, not even noticing that it would translate to my 3D work, it kind of did naturally. And also with that kind of study kind of integrating itself into my work, as well as me trying to find my style, I think those two kind of like combined, and it helped me develop this sort of design and look that people can kind of recognize. And it was almost organic how that came to be.
Cool. So you just said a bunch of things I kind of want to dig into. And the first thing that you said that was really interesting was you said that you sort of got your motion design career going first. Like that was phase one. And then you figured out what your look and style was going to be. And I think that that's, I mean, you know, to me, that seems like a very smart way to do it. It's practical, you know, it's like sometimes as artists, we get really fixated on finding our voice and stuff like that. But as a practical matter, as someone who wants to pay their bills doing this, do you think that, you know, would you recommend to other artists to do it that way? To like, you know, don't worry about finding your voice just yet. Like first, just get a job, get some experience, you know, give yourself a couple of years, then do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier to find your style and look whenever you aren't worrying about money as much or trying to find a job or just anything like that. I mean, it kind of morphed from me grinding to me just doing that artist kind of thing, you know, just kind of like trying to, you know, put myself into my art and all those kind of like cheesy things. But it's much easier doing it the way I did. I think, I mean, I didn't really try to do it that way or have like a reasoning. It just kind of happens. And I think I probably got really lucky that I was okay with doing it that way. That it kind of helped me stay on this path to get to where I wanted to be. I always had big goals for my career, but I didn't know how to get there. I just knew that I was going to get there eventually. So having that larger goal in mind kind of helps you organically create this path towards what you want.
I love that you called it cheesy. Like that whole idea of like put yourself into your art. But actually it sounds like, you know, like when I look at your work and I look at your portfolio, it has a look. And, you know, I mean, you may already be at the point where people can sort of pick out something that Mitch has done. But it seems like that's actually coming from something that you love, which is film theory, and just the language of film in general. And so that is practically what it means to put yourself into your work. It doesn't mean like, you know, Jim Carrey, like, you know, locking himself in a painting studio for a month and not eating and painting all day. It's actually like just doing what you like. And somehow that in this kind of weird esoteric way translates into your work. So I want to ask you about the film theory thing, because you said in my spare time, I like to study film theory, but what does that mean? Like, do you just watch movies and sort of like reverse engineer them? Or do you read books? Do you read websites? Like, how do you actually grasp what's happening?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I think a long time while I was doing that, I didn't really notice that I was studying film theory. I was just studying what was interesting to me about film. And it was always kind of that behind the scenes why and like the reasoning behind doing certain things to get certain reactions or emotions from your audience. That was always really interesting because that's kind of like the magic behind it. So it kind of just developed out of me just doing that naturally when I watch films. And then noticing that I was, this is film theory. Like this stuff actually, I'm not making some of the stuff in my head. Like this stuff actually has a reasoning. And so from there, going and trying to find whatever I could on film theory, which is kind of hard actually, because if you Google film theory, there's a lot of different things that people consider film theory.
Right.
So you kind of have to, I guess, pick and choose what you are actually interested in when it comes to film theory, or at least that's what I did, which would be more so lighting and camera moves and cut sequences, stuff like that. Just kind of ways to tell a story without having any, reactions, or you don't even have to have a certain actor or actress in the scene. You can just tell a story just by the way you move a camera or light something or cut something, stuff like that. Like that's what's really magical to me. And so that's what I naturally kind of studied. And there's unfortunately nothing I can really recommend to people if they want to find information on film theory, just because I don't have that on hand. I mean, it's always kind of been an organic kind of study and research for me. But it's
well, I know that I was gonna recommend, and unfortunately, it's not actually still going. But Every Frame a Painting was this YouTube channel that was, I think, probably the best example of somebody teaching film theory in like a really digestible way.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually makes a lot of sense now that you gravitated towards 3D, because if you're into cinematography and lighting and camera movement and things like that lends itself very well to 3D. Whereas, I mean, it still lends itself to After Effects too, but it's more abstract. There's more of a one-to-one relationship. So that's really cool. So I was going to ask you, like, you mentioned that you sort of fell in love with 3D and decided that's what you wanted to specialize in. Were there any other things about 3D that kind of pulled you away from the traditional, like, MoGraph After Effects thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the film theory part of it was pretty big in the decision, just because it's a little more natural, like you were saying, in 3D, to kind of see your camera and your lights and set things up, especially with these new render engines. It's like you can set something up the same way you would practically, and you would get the same results, which is fantastic. And especially when you're art directing and stuff like that, you can much more easily think of how it should be in your minds and translate that to 3D than you used to be able to. So yeah, it's a little more just natural for me to be in that 3D kind of world. And just people ask me a lot how to find your look and like, how does that come about and how do you get your own style? And it's almost, there's no real kind of thing that you gotta do in order to get that. But for me, it was everything that I would do for fun would be in Cinema 4D and doing 3D stuff, and everything that I made, that I at least had like a passion to make, and the reasoning that I kind of developed that look was these things that I was doing on my downtime. And if you're basically making these things for fun and you're doing it constantly, I mean, that kind of develops into your look in general. And being able to get the clients and make the money from the type of work that I would be doing on my downtime is kind of like the golden ratio.
Right. Well, it reminds me, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, but I want to say one of the things that I always kind of harp on when I talk to people about, freelancing primarily, but also just sort of being in this field in general, is that if you want to get paid to do something, you first have to do it without getting paid. And so when you're messing around and doing these personal projects and stuff like that, that's the stuff you like to do. So if you want to get paid to do that, well, you better be good at it and like doing it enough that you'll do it for free for a while.
Yes, very.
Yeah. So before we get to that, I want to talk about a little bit more about your background. So in LinkedIn, I saw you got a Bachelor of Fine Arts from DeVry, which was interesting. I didn't even know that they offered BFAs for multimedia design and development. So I'm just curious, like, what was that program like, and what skills did you develop there?
I mean, I think college at this point, at least from what I know about the industry now, it's kind of a good and bad thing for a lot of people, I think. The good would be just, college is the place to kind of gain connections and hopefully learn something. And hopefully learn something. But I mean, it also costs so much money.
Yes.
So the school that I went to was not too great. I didn't really gain any sort of knowledge or anything really. I mean, like half of my college career was taking like, your prerequisites and stuff like that didn't really have anything to do with design.
Right.
And it kind of felt to me like I was paying for not a whole lot of anything. And so I was developing my style and my craft and career and all that stuff much faster than what the college could kind of keep up with anyway, just because I'm incredibly motivated and determined to meet certain goals that I've set for myself in my career, that it might even be the situation to where that I was just kind of outdoing myself, and not really, I was a little too far ahead, I guess. So my reasoning behind the college thing was it developed basically into, let's get this piece of paper, and then let's go find a good salary job, and stick with something like that. Which now is funny that I'm freelance and I don't necessarily need that piece of paper anymore. But I mean, I think when it comes down to it, like when you look back on how you started your career and stuff like that, you wouldn't really necessarily change anything, just because the decisions I've made up to this point have gotten me to where I am now. So I can't really harp on college too much, but it's just kind of like one of those things I had to get through in order to make the type of decisions that I'm making now.
Right. I mean, I've got a lot of opinions about college. I've voiced them very strongly on this podcast, but I agree with you. I mean, there's no way to A/B test your life and to know what would have happened had you not gone to college and just instead, stayed at home, like practicing, doing tutorials or reading books or whatever. But it's just interesting to hear that. And, so then my next question is, so where did like your design chops come from? Because, looking at especially your early work, if you go to Mitch's website right now, you're going to see a lot of like really cool high-end 3D looking stuff. Like everything kind of feels like it was made by the same artist. But then if you go back in time, if you Google stalk Mitch a little bit, you find his Behance page maybe or his Vimeo page, you'll find a lot of stuff you did for like, the St. Louis Rams, where it's way more traditional broadcast graphics kind of stuff. But the compositions are strong, the typography's strong. You clearly have design chops. And I'm curious where that came from, if not from school.
Yeah, I don't really know. Because I started designing while I was playing music, and it was basically doing merch design on tour, because a lot of the times on the road it's really boring. You have like 2 hours of real intense excitement, and then the rest of your time as a musician is very boring. So I don't know, maybe it's just from practice. I mean, doing things in repetition is probably the best way to get good at something, and maybe it's a little bit of talent, but I don't know. It's been a process of kind of finding myself in an artistic field, whether it be music or design or motion design or visual effects or whatever. It's kind of me from the beginning of my professional career in anything to where I am now has been a constant kind of molding of myself and changing directions and finding out what truly makes me happy, because that's been kind of the reasoning why I've made any decision in my life. And I'm the type of person to make quick decisions, no matter kind of how daunting they may be. If I feel it in my gut that it's the right one to make. So I think just through the molding of myself and my career, I've kind of taken what I've found out that I've needed to excel at and worked incredibly hard on trying to actually be at the caliber that I want myself to be in. So I think a lot of the design, at least to where it's gotten to, is just basically me really focusing on being the person that can make something look really good.
So we should just say real quick for people listening that don't know, but in a previous life, Mitch was in, was it a soft rock band, like a jazz band? Mitch toured with? Actually, how many strings did your guitar have? Did it have 6 or 7? I guess that's the real question here.
Yes, it had 6. It was before the 7-string gent fad that is going on at the moment. But yeah, it's good old like metalcore stuff, like As I Lay Dying, and those, the 2008 situation where metalcore got really big and like every city's scene was awesome, and like,
I was there.
Those were insane. It was so good. But yeah, that was my past life. It was fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I hope that gent fad never goes away.
I know it's
my jam right now. It's my jam right now.
It's sweet.
But anyway, what I wanted to ask you about was, so I think you and I have like probably a similar mindset. Like when I was starting out, I was like super ambitious and very driven, and I've always been fairly disciplined and able to practice and things like that. But my work didn't really start to get better until I had some kind of feedback mechanism where I could have somebody tell me that's good or that's not good. Or at least have a way to compare, and develop some taste really. And so I'm just curious, like how that happened for you, or if maybe you didn't need that. Maybe you've just got like an aptitude for it,
Yeah, I think a lot of the time when I was trying to be good, it was me looking at other people's work and just like feeling like crap. And it a lot of the times I'll love my work, and then 5 minutes later, it's like pure trash to me. And so it's hard to kind of keep motivation when your mindset is like that. But also, if you kind of flip that around and think, okay, like my work is not too great, at least in the grand scheme of things, when I compare myself to what I consider the best, it's almost a motivating factor. I always have this thing in my head, and it's about like me, I guess, manifesting in inverted commas, like my future. And it's basically, I have already gotten to where I want to be in my career. I just haven't gotten to that point in time yet. Right. So like I'm already, like feeling great about my work. Like I'm have people coming to me saying like their work inspires them. It's like blah, blah, blah. I just am not at that point in time. So it's kind of like a motivating factor that things will be the way I want them to be and my goals will be met. And I just have to do whatever I have to in order to get there. So I think it was mainly seeing how under par I was, but being motivated in the fact that there's so high level of design and craft that I could possibly reach that it's really exciting. And I wasn't really sure where my career was going to go at that point anyway. So it was kind of this very fluid, make decisions when they need to be made and adapt as quickly as possible and just keep myself happy and my mindset correct. And once you're a happy individual, like I feel like your art can excel in a certain degree that you wouldn't be able to if you're depressed, which is funny because everyone thinks of artists as kind of, that depressing figure in like the dark room that's putting their like emotions into their art and stuff. But I mean, I don't know, for me, it's always been about like happiness and feeling successful and motivated, and it kind of translates to being in that positive mindset when I make something, and it's just like excitement nonstop. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I want to kind of, you're making me think, like, I want to call out your mindset there, because I think that's really, really, really important for people to hear, especially if you're starting out in the industry. Motion design, like a lot of fields, is one where you are going to suck for a while. Like, it's just a very hard thing to get good at. And it just takes time, and it takes, you have to get all those bad designs out of your brain so that finally you can start getting some good ones in there. And a lot of times, that burns people out. People leave the industry. People, just kind of settle or whatever. But the way that you're kind of describing your mindset, almost like you're pre-visualizing the day when, your expectations of yourself will match reality, and you're just closing that gap slowly. It's really like the way to stay motivated, because I don't know, there's like a saying, I think it's, I'm not sure if it's actually like a compliment or not, but I heard someone once say that, Americans are kind of unique because, everybody is just, a millionaire in waiting or something like that, like like in some cultures, that's not the way people think, but that is a very ambitious, uniquely sort of American way of looking at things. Like, I'm already successful in the future. I just have to wait long enough till I get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It seems to have worked really well for you.
Yeah, I think it's, if you have these bigger goals in mind for yourself, it's like you can really manifest your future, which is a weird way to say that. It almost sounds like
a little woo-woo.
Yeah, yeah, for real. But it's true, and it has like real legit like grounding in the actual, I guess, step-by-step kind of like situation. Because if you do have those bigger goals, and you do believe that you are going to reach those, you'll make actions and decisions in your daily life that subconsciously you will be making because of that bigger goal. Right. And you might not notice it in that certain time or something like that. But you look back on it and you'll be like, oh man, like I've made so many little decisions that have played a part in this bigger kind of grand scheme of things that I've had for my life. And it's kind of ended up to where I am now. And it's weird that you can kind of think in that kind of esoteric kind of mindset, but then you look back on it and there's real like weight to it, and it actually like it has made kind of a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that stuff. And I mean, it's interesting, like if you talk to people who've had success in their field, in any field, a lot of times you hear these kinds of ideas, and this is something that I think about a lot because, part of my job, most of my job is trying to help people get from where they are to where they want to be. And a lot of times it's just a matter of practice and time. Mm-hmm. And so the key is, how do you keep someone motivated enough to just put in the work? If they put in the work, they will get what they're after.
Yeah.
It's a matter of time. And having a positive outlook and all those things, I think that's really like the key to the whole thing. So let's talk a little bit about your more recent work. So, earlier in your career, you mentioned you had a full-time job. You were, working, you called them agencies, but was it like an ad agency or like a studio? Like, what actually was the company you were working for?
Yeah. So my first paying salary gig was a motion designer for the St. Louis Rams. Cool. And we were doing a lot of that, like online website type of video work. We did some documentary style stuff for NFL Network, and then we were doing like the graphics and visuals for the stadium. So it was kind of like a good, well-rounded type of job. I was doing a lot of different things, and the people that I was working with were super awesome, and I was allowed to kind of put my flavor into it. even though back then it was like my first job, I didn't have a whole lot of flavor, but I was at least able to kind of spread my little wings a little bit and start to kind of think in different ways and stuff. And then after that, I was like, okay, I want to be in an agency now. I never really thought I was going to do like sports stuff. I'm not like a huge sports guy. It was just kind of like a good introductory to this type of industry, I think. And so I was like, okay, I want to go to an agency. I want to work with different clients every day. I want to see more about what this whole thing is about. And I had the decision to either go to LA and stay with the Rams, or go to Chicago. And I had a potential position with the guys up at Leviathan, and they're like an awesome agency. So I was really jazzed about that. Or to stay in St. Louis and try to find something here. And it came down ultimately to me having a wife and a little baby girl at that time. And we were a bit grounded here. It even got up to the point to where we were in Chicago, like looking at houses, like really like a second away from making the decision when I got the call from an agency down here called Vidzu Media. And they were interested in me coming in and working for them. So we decided to stay in St. Louis and go with Vidzu, and it was a really cool place to work with. We were working with like large clients. We had some pretty big ones like Sam's and Southwest, stuff like that. And it was a pretty cool time, and I was there for I think a year and a half, almost 2 years, when I decided that this still wasn't necessarily right for me. I was having a good time. I was doing decently cool work, but I just didn't feel complete. And so that's when the freelance thing started popping in my head. I'm like, maybe I should do this. Is it going to be okay? Am I going to like totally ruin my career or even my taste for this type of thing? And then even it was scary that I was like, what if I don't like freelance either? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not completely satisfied with anything. I'm going to have to rethink this whole situation. So I was deathly scared of almost any possibility, going freelance. But like I said, I mean, like I have these goals. So I was like, hey, I still want to complete these. And this seems like the route has kind of presented itself to me in this fashion, so I just have to go for it. And then getting the all clear from my wife was like, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it now. Like, yeah, she's said it's okay, and she has faith in me that I'll make it successful. So it's like, whatever, let's do it then. And it's been like it hasn't even been a year yet that I've been freelance.
That's amazing, frankly. That it hasn't even been a year, and you've got the work on your portfolio that you have. So let's talk about that. So, looking at your old work for the Rams, and some of the other things that I think I saw maybe on like your Vimeo page or something, like they're very, very different than what you're doing now. Like you can't tell. Like you couldn't look at, a piece you've done a month ago and a piece that you did for the Rams and tell that it was you, right? Yeah. It's like you've totally just changed the type of look that you're achieving. And I'm curious if that progression, because to me, like from the outside, it looks like, like a 180-degree U-turn. I'm sure it was more gradual from your perspective, but like, did you have to consciously make this choice and switch gears and say, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm freelance. I don't want to be doing that kind of stuff. I want to be doing this kind of stuff, and just close that door?
Yeah, I think it was very unconscious up to a point. Because it was very recent that this kind of look presented itself. And it was while I was working with the agency Vidzu, and we were doing a lot of corporate type work, which is really cool. But I had that side of me that kind of needed this artistic outlet that I wasn't necessarily getting with the clients that we had. And so that's when I started doing things on my downtime much more than I used to, doing random renders and things like that on my lunch break, and just testing different scenarios with lighting and different materials, stuff like that. And I was really getting jazzed and excited about the possibilities that were kind of presenting itself to me. And I organically landed on the type of look that I've developed for myself up to today, just from sheer just having fun, and always going back to that type of look. It just kind of organically happened. And then it got to the point to where I consciously noticed it, and I was like, okay, I'm not doing this type of work here, but I want to do this work. Like, this is fun. I'm having a lot of fun with this, and I want to be in Cinema 4D as much as possible now, and I want to be like a 3D dude. And I think that was part of the reason too that I went freelance, or at least made that decision, was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make sure I'm doing the type of work that I want? And the agency that I was at was awesome because they were totally excited about what I was creating, and they wanted to be that foundation for me and get the type of clients that I wanted to have and stuff. It was pretty amazing. I don't think I would ever find that in any other agency that I probably would have been at. But in doing that, it still felt like I needed full control to be able to make the really quick decisions that I felt I needed to make to be a specialist instead of a jack of all trades, because I really needed to set myself apart in order to be successful in that. And so that was that part of that jump too. It's like, okay, now I'm free to either fail or be successful. So let's just do it. And we're just going to see what people think, basically.
I mean, that's exactly what happened to me the first time that I went freelance. You know, I had a very supportive boss. I was an editor at the time, but I was doing a lot of After Effects in addition to editing. And I told him, I want to focus on motion graphics. This is what I want to do. And he was super supportive and tried his best to get more work like that. But in the end, if there was an editing job, that's what I was doing. I had to do it. And so that's something that I talk about a lot too, is that when you're on staff, it can be an amazing situation, but you don't have control. Mm-hmm. That's just one of the things you give up being on staff. So your portfolio, and actually like your entire brand really, like, well, let me take a step backwards. A lot of freelancers, if I go to their site, and you know, when I was freelance, I was certainly guilty of this too. Like, you'd go to my site and it would say Joey Kornman, motion designer, and you'd have little thumbnails of all my work, and it looked very clean and very professional, but there was really not like a brand. There was not really much personality, nothing to differentiate it. Yours, on the other hand, has this very strong brand. Like, you know, you've got your logo and a color palette, and even like the tone of the copy on your page, and it sort of matches the way you present yourself in real life on podcasts and videos I've seen you in. You know, and I think when I was doing the research, it struck me that like it kind of feels like a band's website, like almost more than a motion designer's. So I'm curious, how did you like arrive at this? Like, did you think I have to come up with a brand and sit down and brainstorm? Like, how did you arrive at this look and feel?
Yeah, so I've always had a huge passion for branding, and it's probably been even more so than the film theory side of my work. It's just it's because of the same thing though. It's like that magic behind the art, and like with advertising and branding and stuff, it's like it's manipulative. It can either be for good or bad, I guess, but just the fact that it can be is really interesting to me. And so I've always studied like advertising and branding and why things work and why other things don't and stuff like that. So when I got the chance to do it for myself, that was like incredibly exciting, because I'm like that self-promoter and the guy who enjoys talking about himself and his work and stuff. Like, right. It's very exciting to me. And so I was like, sweet, like, let's make this brand like badass. And so looking at the type of style that I developed during that time, like I made the brand that I have now very recently too. I've always had like a logo for myself, but it was just a logo. And it wasn't even the one that I have today. I did a little refresher on it. And if you look like down through, I think probably my Instagram would be the best place, you'll see that the logo changed a certain date on the photos. And that was when I was in the process of really solidifying how I wanted people to view me as an artist and a professional. And it got so granular to where it's like I wanted people to see a certain color and think of me. It didn't even have to be a certain style of like 3D render or anything. Like I just want it to be very organic, that I would pop in people's heads. And I knew that was going to be a thing that would at least contribute to my success. And at that point, going freelance and being nervous about it, I was like, I'm gonna do whatever I could possibly can to make sure that I can be some sort of a standout artist in this kind of huge pool of other artists that are trying to make money.
Right.
So I think when developing the type of brand that I was being very picky and very I had a reason behind every sort of decision that I was making. And it helped quite a bit, I think. And I think it's helped me kind of put myself out there as more than just an artist, but an actual brand that people can either relate to or enjoy following or anything like that. And hopefully like it continues to develop itself into something cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unique, and it feels very, it feels polished. It feels personal. I want to talk about, when I say branding, I think a lot of times people think of like the logo and maybe like the color palette and stuff like that. But really, your brand is like a lot more than that. I think it really trickles down even into like the way you describe things on your website. On your about page, for example, you had a section where you sort of your bio, and there's kind of this like confidence and I think I used the word swagger to describe it. I think that there was a quote in your about page that said, "I also have garnered a pretty legit following," and just typing that out and being cool with like potential clients reading that says a lot about the type of brand that you're trying to build. I want to ask you specifically about that confidence and that swagger. Do you think that that's something that like every artist should do? Just be sort of, very bold with the way they speak, or is that just something that you do because it fits your personality?
Yeah, I think it definitely fits my personality. Like I'm very laid back, and I just want to have fun, That's why I'm like in this field. But also I think it obviously works, and larger brands are like, it's crazy, but they're just now figuring this out, to be very genuine and put your type of style and character into everything you do. It just helps you connect with your audience like much more than, just having a stale kind of corporate situation. And thinking about that, I mean, it gets really down to like how I write emails and how I talk to my clients, and the way I send invoices, and like literally everything has branding in mind for me. Not only does it create something that people can fall back on and relate to and recognize, but it also is a good way to kind of like present yourself as more than just an artist, but in an actual, if you're putting this much thought into your own website and the way you present yourself, then like a client's going to recognize like, wow, they're going to put a lot of thought and reasoning behind the type of work that they're going to do for us, and it's going to be worth the amount that they're asking for, that his rate is. It just puts that a little bit more professionalism in it too, even though you're being a little bit more, I guess, laid back in how you're presenting yourself. As long as you're consistent, then I think you're golden.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about, because your brand and everything. I mean, like it's red, it's dark, it's a little bit edgy, it's like super confident, and all that kind of stuff. And looking at your work, I see you did stuff for like the Glitch Mob, and I'm sure that like that attracts a certain type of client too. But I also would imagine that might turn some other clients off, right? Like I don't know, like if a deodorant company, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like some sort of safe company was looking for an artist and they saw your site, they might think, whoa, this guy is too edgy. Even though, of course, you're perfectly capable of doing that work too.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if like, does that bother you at all? Like, do you think is that okay that like you might actually be turning some potential clients away by having such a strong brand?
Oh, totally. That's totally cool with me. I mean, I think I've developed myself into the type of artist that has a certain look and feel and stuff like that. And I've done that for a reason, that being to get the type of clients that I want. And I want to get those type of clients in a fashion that makes me enough money to live, but also I have fun doing, every project almost. Like I haven't, since going freelance, I haven't had one bad project. They've all been incredibly fun. And I think that's a testament to the way I've developed my brand. And it almost, I don't have to send an email to be like, you're the type of client I want. They can go to my website and recognize that they're the type of client that I would want, which makes it easier on me.
That's really, really smart. And, it reminds me, one of the people I follow on the internet is named Seth Godin. He's kind of like this business marketing genius. And a lot of what he talks about is this idea that, large companies and large brands, they have to please everybody. Mm-hmm. And so that's what waters it down. But, there's so much work out there. So even as a motion designer specializing in 3D and even like a certain look, there's still so much work out there that you can have this very kind of niche feeling brand that might turn some clients off and still get the work that you want. And I love that it's bringing you the work you want, and you're not having to slum it as much as some other motion designers may have to.
Totally. You can think about it like car brands almost, like Ford and Chrysler and things like that. They kind of appeal to everyone. They have a car for almost everybody. But if you look at like Lambo, it's like, it's the 1% who can have one, but everybody knows how badass Lambos are.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk a little bit about social media. And, it's interesting when I hear motion designers talk about how social media is like a real successful channel for them to get work. When I was freelance, it wasn't even that long ago. I think it might have been like 4 years ago was my last freelance gig or something like that. It wasn't that easy to get booked from social media. You still had, still had to do like a lot of outreach and stuff, unless you were amazing, unless you're Jorge.
Right.
But now it seems like everybody's doing it. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how social media has actually helped your success.
Totally. It's been pretty incredible. I mean, most of my clients come in through email. Like I don't get a lot of clients like giving me like an Instagram DM or anything. It's not to that point, but there's been a lot of clients who have mentioned my Instagram before they've mentioned my website, which is funny. And I think I'm incredibly glad that I've put the investment towards social media and recognized that that's going to be a big part of my growth as an artist as social media kind of grows in society, and putting a lot of time to make sure that I will be successful in the social media front. And it's helped a ton, just being able to be in a ton of different locations for people to see is one of the obvious parts about, advertising, especially just advertising and marketing yourself, as being in as many places as possible so people see you wherever they turn. And social media is easily a help with that. Just having Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, even tons of different stuff where people can be scrolling around and see your work, and go somewhere else, scroll around and see your work again, and you're always popping up. Tons of clients have just been like, hey, our creative director has been following you on Instagram for a while and your style is perfect for us. Let's do something. So I think if you are a motion designer, visual effects artist, or editor, whatever, like any sort of field where you're trying to get people to pay you for your craft, like utilize social media as much as possible. You don't have to like hound people or promote really, or, be one of those serial guerrilla marketers that's just trying to like hound people for work. You can just be present on all these social media things. And if your work is good and people recognize that, then like it's really organic.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like social media alone probably isn't enough to have the kind of success that you're seeing. But I think it's like, the way I look at getting gigs was always it's a numbers game. And, I always had a lot of success actually going the other way. Like I would go to clients and tell them about me just because I felt it was like a little bit more efficient. But now Instagram is so ubiquitous. Behance is turning into this like really great way to get booked. And they're fairly low cost in terms of your time, like to
Totally.
take something cool you just did and put it on Instagram and hashtag it takes, seconds. To put, a little case study on Behance for the project you just did might take a couple of hours, but I mean, you basically now have a worm on a hook in a pond 24/7, kind of doing work for you. So I think it's awesome. And I can't wait to see where it goes. And I just encourage everyone listening to go look at Mitch's presence. And we'll link to everything in the show notes. Another part of your online presence is you on your site, you have actual products that you've created, like lighting kits and stuff. You have a few tutorials. You actually have a newsletter, which is something that I've almost never seen, I think, on a motion designer's portfolio site. And, you've been kind of making the rounds on industry podcasts and stuff like that. You've spoken for Maxon. I mean, you kind of are everywhere. I'm curious, is all of that sort of coordinated, or are those things actually a result of the success that you've had with some of your projects, like the Adobe splash screen? That, did those things fall in your lap, or did you do those and they help create the success?
Yes. So it's a little bit of both. I think obviously getting the Adobe thing with JR was a huge boost to my career. And that was like my first freelance gig, which is crazy. Yeah, which is insane. My first month of freelance was like the busiest time of my life because I had SeaGraph with Maxon I was doing a presentation for. I had two projects with the Mill, and I also had the Adobe splash screen thing in 1 month. So I was freaking out. But I think the ability to I guess get to where I am now with all these different types of things that I'm doing has been partly being lucky enough to get those types of projects that really stand out, and then also being the person who manifests a lot in his life. And I think it's been a part of me having that bigger goal, and then these things presenting itself and me taking the action to actually make it a reality. And I love doing things like this. Like I love doing these podcasts, and I love speaking for Maxon. And I'm the type of person to where it's easy to put myself out there, which may not be the case for a lot of people. I know there's a lot of introverts in this industry. And I used to be quite introverted until I got into music, which almost forces you not to be an introvert at that point. But I think being open to taking the types of opportunities that life presents itself is part of being successful. And I think the reason that a lot of people might have trouble being as successful as they possibly could be is because they're afraid to take either afraid or just don't recognize the opportunities that life does present itself. There's a lot of little things that happen every day to me that I can create a strategy for, that will help me get closer to those types of goals that I have, and I just take action on it.
Well, speaking of opportunities, I do want to ask you actually about the Adobe After Effects splash screen. So for anyone listening that didn't recognize Mitch's name, when you open up Adobe After Effects CC 2018, you see a splash screen that was designed. It was actually co-designed, I guess, by you and by J.R. Canist, Jorge. In my opinion, probably the best After Effects animator in the world. So I'd love to hear the story of that. Like, how did that come about? How did you and Jorge work together to create this one still frame? Like, tell me a tale, Mitch.
Dude, it was so fun. I got that email from Adobe randomly one night. It was like the weirdest email to read because I was like, wait, what is this? I didn't really necessarily think they were asking me to do the thing that they were actually asking me to do.
But like, why? Like, why you? So I mean, you're very talented.
I know.
But like, did they just randomly find you? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, they said that they were scoping out artists on Behance, and I guess they landed on my stuff, and they basically just said that like me and JR were their top picks, and they wanted to do a co-op thing this year because their idea was they wanted to create some sort of feeling of working together as like a team, and what different types of artists can like create when they come together. And me and JR stuff is very different. He's very 2D oriented. I'm very 3D. Like mine's really, I guess mostly like photorealistic as far as the render types. And then, JR stuff is very, flat, but it also has a lot of texture and a lot of movement, and he's very, very, very good at keyframing. So he's very fluid, I think. And so I'm guessing here, but I'm thinking that's probably the reasoning that they chose both of us to work together, because they just saw the contrast and thought that would create something different. And so me and JR hopped on a video call soon after, briefly talking to the people at Adobe about what their needs were and kind of what they were thinking. And we were just like, holy crap, this is like the busiest month of our lives. Can we even do this? And we both kind of fell on like, there's no way we're going to turn this down. We'll just suffer and like make something really awesome and then just be proud of it after this crazy month is done and over with. So we were like, okay, how are we going to do this? What are each other's objectives going to be? And like, first Adobe wanted to do an animation instead of just a still. And unfortunately our calendars were so insane that month that we just weren't able to do an animation. But we did fall on the still, and we were like, okay, we're just going to at least focus incredibly hard on this and just make it as cool as we possibly can think of. And JR's initial ideas were with the kind of geometric look. And he did some cool tests where he took the circle, square, and triangle that you see like on the new composition button in After Effects, and he was like doing some cool test scenes in Illustrator with those types of shapes in that composition to see if we can make something cool with that. And we basically just fell on going with that geometric shape that JR was wanting to do. And then I kind of thought of a way that we could make some sort of reasoning behind it, which was we're going to put this very geometric, rigid kind of structure in this organic sort of 3D realistic world. And it's going to be kind of that compare contrast of this very mechanical type of program that does these really crazy things in the artist's kind of mind that's very organic and fluid and creative, and how those two work together. So that's kind of where we went with it, and we created a ton of different versions of both the scene and the geometrics, and it was easy process. Adobe was like, "Hey, use these colors," and then that's it. You can do whatever you want, which is awesome.
I mean, it sounds like the schedule was stressful, but I mean, what a dream gig. And it actually now hearing that from you, it makes total sense, because I know Jorge and I know his work really well, and that geometric kind of is almost like an After Effects mandala or something. And just using the interface of After Effects, like the little, sort of null object, circle that you've created. But then you turned all that into 3D, and it looks like, you've got volumetrics, you've got a bunch of glows. I love how it turned out, man. You guys must be really, really psyched about that. Yep.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so let me ask you one more thing about sort of how you get work. Like, do you you have this really great social media presence and online presence and brand, and I think that really does a lot of work for you. Do you actually need to go out and tell people about, hey, I'm Mitch and I'm a motion designer? Like, do you do that to get work too, or has it just been inbound so far?
Yeah, I up to this point, I haven't had to do any emails, anything like that. But I do it every day anyway, just because I like to talk about myself and shop my work and stuff, just because I want people's reactions and I want to see where I lie. And it's all like almost everything I do is all to get an outside view of where I am in conjunction with the goals that I have. So every day when I'm not sitting on cinema working with a client, if I have like an off day or something, I'll be on social chit-chatting, or I'm talking to people to see if I can get in for like a speaking gig or just any type of opportunity that I can create for myself in my career. That's kind of where my downtime is. And then plus just doing the normal teaching, with yourself, just trying to like gain as much knowledge as you can, and then trying to spread that around to the industry too. And just being that open person that people can come to and ask questions, and me being willing to just like help whoever out. Like that's incredibly satisfying too. And I think it comes back around most of the time, more often than not. I've given away some clients to some motion designers just because I didn't have time on my calendar, and then it'll come back to where I have like a week free, and then that guy or gal will come to me and be like, hey, I have this client and I just can't take them right now. Do you want to hop on it? And then I'll be like, yeah. So this industry is cool in that way, to where at least when it comes down to the artists and their relationships to each other, it's very open, and everyone's like a friend. Like if you're a motion designer and you go to a place like NAB or anything like that, and you hang around the Adobe or a cinema booth, like everyone's like a big friend and just like hugging people and just talking about their work, and everything's just really fun.
Yeah, that's definitely true. With every guest that I have on, I always try to like find some takeaway to give the listener, like some lesson. And I think like with you, there's so many. We've talked about a lot, but one that is really sticking in my brain, and one I definitely kind of want to explore more, I think, is the idea of, letting your brand and your online presence do a lot of the work for you. I mean, you're hustling, you're doing everything. You're doing inbound, you're doing outbound, you're, doing your own PR and marketing and everything. But I mean, your brand and the way your site looks and the way it's presented and the way you present, like it seems like doing a lot of work for you. Like this Adobe project being a perfect example. And it sounds like what you're doing now is like you're planting a lot of seeds that, you haven't even been freelancing a year. In another year, you'll be turning down work every day, because if you're doing, making friends, referring work, doing all those things, I mean, it's a really good strategy. I think everyone listening should kind of study what Mitch is doing in terms of the business side, also the art side, but I mean, the business side, you're just crushing it. So my last question for you is this, a problem that can sometimes happen, and I think, and I suspect that this will happen to you because you are an ambitious person. You have a lot of drive. And sometimes you can run into the situation of like, all right, well, I've kind of achieved all the goals that I wrote down. Now what? You know, and you've worked with Adobe and you did the Glitch Mob album cover. And I'm sure like, you know, there's other things you're working on right now that are really cool. And, you know, like you're sort of MoGraph famous because of the splash screen. Like what's the next thing for you? Like, do you have a goal in mind? Like, do you have, you know, like, are you worried that one day you're going to be like, oh shit, I've done it all, you know? And I'm like, you know, I don't know how old you are, but you know, like you'll be like under 40 and like all those boxes will be checked off.
Definitely. I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 35. So that's a big goal for me. And I'm 28 now, so I got still some time. But I also own some businesses on the side. Like me and my wife own a salon together. I'm very in tune with that entrepreneurial lifestyle, and that's just like how I find happiness, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of things like that. So I think it's easier because I'm not only putting all of my eggs in the motion design basket as far as just being happy. And I think I'll always be a motion designer and an artist and things like that. But there's also a lot of other things that need my attention, which keeps things really fresh, as well as super busy. But I feel like I'm always happy to either get back to my computer to jump on Cinema 4D and make something pretty. And then I'm always happy to go and manage the other businesses that I have going on right now. And at this point, it's kind of hard to tell what the next step for me would be in motion design, especially as a freelancer, because I'm like so fresh into freelancing. And I'm just kind of like enjoying this new lifestyle that I've created for myself. And there are a lot of other goals that I have that I haven't gotten to yet. Like I really am into title design. And I would love to do like a title sequence and stuff like that in my career at one point. I think there's a lot of opportunities that I still haven't been able to take advantage of and things like that. So I just, you know, I want to see where my career brings me to. Like I've done so many different things, you know, playing music and stuff like that. And my life has always kind of given me these little opportunities and routes that I could possibly take. So I'm just kind of excited to see what this year and next year and the year after that kind of creates for itself and where I might end up 5 years down the road.
Check out Mitch's work at mitchmeyers.tv, and all the links we mentioned will be in the show notes at schoolofmotion.com. I want to thank Mitch for coming on and just being himself and telling everyone about how he's achieved so much success in a short amount of time. All of the things that he's done to help his career are things that you can do too. And I hope you take action. And if you do, if you like this episode, please let us know. Hit us up on Twitter at School of Motion, or head to the site, and there you can check out the monstrous amount of free content that we have for you. Thanks so much for listening, and I cannot wait to be inside your ears again.